My lords, as leader of your lordship's house, it's a sad duty, but nonetheless a great privilege to pay tribute on behalf of the whole house to the late Viscount-Whitelaw, who died this morning at the age of 81. Many noble lords, and indeed many in another place, were personal friends of the noble Viscount over very many years, and many more were political colleagues and sparring partners. I'm sure that the whole House will agree that the noble Viscount held a particularly significant place in the affections of both Houses of Parliament. The noble Viscount, who was known to many here and away from Westminster simply as Willie Whitelaw, had an extremely distinguished career in politics. There's no need for me to remind your lordships in detail of the noble Viscount's achievements. Suffice it for me to say that after a distinguished service in the forces, decorated with the Military Cross, Willie Whitelaw won a seat in the House of Commons where he represented Cumbria, Penrhos and the Border Division from 1955 to 1983. During that time, he served in a number of senior government posts, including as Lord President of the Council and Leader of the House of Commons, as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, as Secretary of State for Employment, and as Secretary of State for the Home Department. The noble Viscount joined this House in 1983 and took continuing office as Lord President of the Council and Leader of the House. His combined service on the front benches in the two Houses ran for over 25 years. But it will be as leader of your lordship's house that many people here today will remember him. The noble Viscount was leader of the House at an extremely busy period. Many major government bills were going through Parliament at a time when the House needed very careful handling. I'm sure that noble lords who were here during that period will agree that it was a great tribute to the noble Viscount's consummate skill and special combination of gravitas and charm that such good order was maintained in the House while the government's programme was being successfully delivered. The noble Viscount made a particular contribution to the government in which he served as Deputy Prime Minister, overseeing the work of key cabinet committees. Those of your lordships who had personal experience of his chairmanship of the Star Chamber, so-called, will recall the fairness and strength with which he brought his own special skill to delivering the public expenditure rounds at the time. Perhaps a less formidable skill, but nonetheless one of enormous value, was one that the noble Viscount always exhibited, and was his sense of humour and his ability to see the funny side in any situation. I'm sure that other noble lords who will speak this afternoon will want to share with the House their experience of the noble Viscount returning from his weekly Monday meeting with the Prime Minister and colleagues, full of news of the day and anecdotes about politics of the time. It's of course very difficult to sum up a tribute to a man who commanded such wide respect for so many reasons on so many fronts, and who so well combined a sense of service with a sense of humour. There can be no doubt that as a leader of your lordship's house, the noble Viscount was that invaluable phenomenon, a safe pair of hands. Perhaps I could also add a personal note. My only political encounters with the noble lord were during the latter years of his life, but he was always charmingly courteous to a newcomer to this house, even one then sitting on the opposition benches. But beyond the courtesies, he usually had an intriguing comment to pass on the events of the day when I met him in the corridors, a comment often enlivened by a certain degree of barbed wit. I'm sure that many noble lords who have joined the House in the last decade will, like me, be grateful that we have personal memories of a splendidly engaging personality and a very significant parliamentarian. My lords, on behalf of the whole House, I hope everyone will join with me, and I express our condolences to Lady Whitelaw and to the family. Our thoughts are with them and will be in the future.
Yeah. My lords, may I, on behalf of these benches, join the noble Baroness in paying tribute to my noble friend Lord Whitelaw, known by so many as Willie. And can I, of course, thank the noble Baroness for her words. Though he'd not been well for a while, it is still a great blow to lose such an extraordinary man as my noble friend. He was a fine example of service and duty to the people of this country, and most particularly to Parliament. He had a great war record and an extraordinary political one. A chief whip to Ted Heath, the Secretary of State in Northern Ireland, in the Department of Employment and in the Home Office, and subsequently coming here as leader of your Lordship's House, and coming as one of the very last hereditary peers ever to be made. My Lords, in this House we have seen many members, former members of another place, make the transition from that House to this. Your Lordships will know that it is not an easy one to make. But for Willie, it was as easy as crossing the road. He immediately made himself at home. He was comfortable not just with his surroundings, but the people that were here. And he remained remarkably effective almost till the very end. He was a Scot, although living in Penrhos, and a countryman. And both Cumbria and Scotland will be the poorer for his passing. But, my lords, he also carried with him a tremendous sense of humour and a great understanding of human nature. He always recognised when someone was talking rubbish, and behind his bluff exterior was a finely honed and cunning political mind. He was a great help to me as a minister in this House, but he really came into his own when I became the chief whip. From time to time, he would steal into my room and give me a word of advice. Invariably, he was right, and whenever I did not take his advice, I came to regret it almost immediately. My lords, I too join the noble Baroness in saying that our thoughts at this time are for his family, and in particular, Lady Whitelaw. My lords, undoubtedly, the whole House will miss Willie Whitelaw, but for the Tory party, he is irreplaceable.
Yeah. My lords, I'm grateful for the opportunity on behalf of these benches in joining in the tribute to the man who we will all remember simply as Willie Whitelaw. Public life has lost a distinctive, wise, and as the leader of the House said, very engaging figure. I didn't experience him as leader of the House. That was before my time in your Lordship's House. But I know he performed with very great skill a difficult twin-track role of being an authoritative voice for the government in this House, but also, and as important, a persuasive voice in Cabinet on behalf of your Lordships. We all have, I think, our personal memories. Mine is of serving on a committee with him on the Contracts of Employment Bill 1963 in another place. I was new, young, partisan, even perhaps brash, and he was the parliamentary secretary in charge of the bill. At first I thought of him as a slightly laughable Bertie Wooster figure, but I discovered very quickly that behind that slightly muddling style there was a very great deal of substance. He was a man of considered opinions, bravely held, but prepared to listen, persuade, or be persuaded. And I also remember him, and have a particular fond memory, flying to Heathrow from Teesside Airport in a very small plane, together with my noble friend Lord Jenkins of Hill Head, in the referendum campaign. He tirelessly advocated Britain's place in Europe and continued during our flight to London, and said, of course, later it was the campaign he most enjoyed in all his life. My lords, I think he will be remembered with affection across party, and he will remain a source of well-told anecdotes for many years to come. We shall all miss him, but we shall also all remember him.
My lords, I had the privilege of being with Lord Whitelaw in both houses, and to be interested in similar subjects. He had an agricultural background and asked me questions when I was Minister of Agriculture, but the questions were sensible and generous, just what I liked. As a noble friend has said, he held a number of ministries, including Ireland, Employment, and of course the Home Office, which he organised with effective common sense, which is not always available there. Finally, he came to this house and became leader when I was his opposition. It was a pleasure I shall not forget. Willie was always ready to discuss problems and to seek solutions. But beyond this, he had a ready humour and a good nature. We were fortunate to know Willie, and we shall miss him. We send our thoughts of Willie to Lady Whitehall today.
My lords, I was not in your lordship's house when Willie Whitelaw was the leader here, but I rise to pay tribute to him on behalf of the Crossbenchers and also in a personal sense. Because, my lords, I had been in the house of the other place only 18 months when, to my astonishment, I was summoned by Lord Whitelaw and invited to join the whip's office. I was put in to represent the New Boys, Suburbia and Trade. My lords, these were vintage days, and I always remember two dictums which Willie Whitelaw drilled into us as whips. First of all, that we should never ever take credit to ourselves, but always give it to the troops. And secondly, that arrangements broken through the usual channels must always be kept, even though we had to fight our own party. As a result, my lords, he was trusted and respected, and I held in very great affection. He was, my lords, a role model for me throughout my time in the other place and to many other members of Parliament as well. He had that most desirable of all parliamentary reputations, the respect of the House, and he will be very greatly missed by all of those who knew him and held him in such high regard and affection.
My lords, I only learned a very short time ago of the sad death of Lord Whitelaw, but I gladly associate the bench of bishops with these tributes. I understand from my friend, the Lord Bishop of Carlisle, that Lord Whitelaw was a very active member of his local church in the parish of Dacre in Cumbria, and undoubtedly he lived his life always as a very deeply committed Christian. He was a good man, a good churchman, and we thank God today for his life and example. We gladly remember in our prayers today his bereaved wife and family.
One of my most endearing memories of Willie were his flashes of extreme anger, which lasted approximately a minute and a half and were followed by totally unnecessary abject apology. He was one of that very small number of immaculate politicians who were supreme in the skills of their profession and at the same time incapable of doing a mean or dishonourable thing. Even among that select company, Willie stood out for his universal kindness and above all his approachability. The legacy of his benign influence will remain in your lordship's house for a long time.
Just to add a word on this occasion to memory of Willie Whitelaw in Northern Ireland. In 1962, there was a high rise of unemployment, particularly among young people, and he was then Minister of Labour Affairs in the United Kingdom government, and he came to Northern Ireland, tried to promote some interest in the affairs of young people, and left a long lasting impression there. It was in my trade union background that I first met him and found him extremely helpful, earnest in his way of approaching. But latterly, when he became Northern Ireland Secretary of State, again with a background of trade unions, not with politics, seeking to represent a broad spectrum of life in Northern Ireland, Willie Whitelaw was a gentleman in many, many ways. He listened attentively. He didn't preach. He didn't lecture, but he talked with you. And he always remembered for the way he handled affairs in Northern Ireland in those dark days.
My lords, I think it may be appropriate if I say a few words today, particularly today when there's so much trouble in Northern Ireland about the setting up of an executive. Willie Whitelaw was the first Secretary of State for Northern Ireland in the dark days of 1972, when nearly 500 people were killed. I said today in Northern Ireland that of all the Secretaries of State that we have had since then, he will be remembered by thousands of people from both communities with great affection. Within a few short months, he was able to talk to the majority Unionist Party and my own party, the SDLP. And he had this great personality. He almost put his arms round the different factions in Northern Ireland, brought us into a room on a few occasions, and within a very short time we had the first executive in Northern Ireland. It was a very real tragedy that Willie had to leave Northern Ireland before the Sunningdale executive was formed. And I have no doubt, and there are many people saying over this past week in few events in Northern Ireland, that if that executive had survived, if Willie had remained there, then we wouldn't have been going through the trauma that Northern Ireland is going through today. Willie Whitelaw was the first Secretary of State and by far the most courageous and far-seeing Secretary of State that has come to Northern Ireland since. He will be sadly missed in Northern Ireland. He will be sadly missed by all those who knew and loved him throughout his lifetime in this country.
Yeah. There have been, I think, nearly a score of leaders of the House since the war. We're a mixed bag. Some people find us very agreeable, others not so. But I think the one thing all the past leaders will agree on, and the present House will agree on, he was the most lovable leader of the House anyone can remember.
My Lords, as one of the family, Willie Whitelaw's eldest daughter is my sister-in-law, and I would like to thank the House for the very good tributes to him. Thank you.
On behalf of the Association of Conservative Peers, I would like to say that we've lost a great friend, a great man, someone who was respected for his integrity, his honour, his sense of duty and sense of service, as someone who was an example to us all. And we will greatly miss him.
The Lord Wallace of Saltaire.
I beg leave to ask the question standing my name in the order paper.